Hello and welcome. The draft new education policy is out. It covers the entire gamut of education. But in the context of school education, which we are going to talk about today, it proposes linking Anganwadis with primary schools, universal foundational literacy and numeracy by 2025, and there's much more. But what does all this mean? What is new? How will it get implemented? How will it get rolled out? What could be the timelines? And what could fundamentally change in the lives of our young children? Joining me to discuss this is Rukmini Banerji, CEO of Pratham. Pratham is one of India's largest NGOs focused on improving the quality of education in the country, particularly in challenging rote learning mechanisms in schools, reconfiguring teaching methodologies, and it also runs the successful ACER study, or the Annual State of Education Report, which looks at learning outcomes. Rukmini Banerji, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, good to be here.
Right. So first question, Rukmini, so how are you reading this new policy, and what to you are the most significant takeaways?
Firstly, I think that we've been waiting for this since the Kasturi Rangan committee handed in their report. And so I'm very happy that it's out, because then it's possible, especially given the year that we have right now, to really think about how to implement it. Normally, any system, particularly the education system, is on a treadmill, and you have to be kind of, driving forward as you're as you're building the road almost. But now I feel with the pace of what will happen this year, it gives us some time to think about how to implement this. So I would say that especially on the school education side, after 15 years of doing ASER, where we've been saying that foundational reading and arithmetic is really important. We are, of course, very pleased with the seriousness with which this foundation has been placed right in the center of the school education piece. And I think that while everybody agrees that these are important things, a very serious central spot perhaps has not been given in our previous education policies. And I think there are two parts to it. One is that these are goals that need to be achieved by a certain stage, and special efforts need to be made. I think the very thick report that came out last year, in fact, in bold letters said, if you don't achieve this, then the rest of the policy is irrelevant. And I think some of that is there in this document as well. But secondly, I think that the importance given to the continuum of early years, I think, is something that we absolutely need to build on. It's not going to be straightforward to do, because it cuts across several ministries and different departments. But I think that is absolutely the need of the day, and hopefully between departments and other things we can figure out how that can be done.
Right. So let me pick one or two specific aspects that have been articulated. So one is the shift of this 5+3+2+2 system that we are familiar with now broadly to a 4+3+3+4, integrated early childhood education, lower primary, and so on, against the early system. So how is that a reflection of the thought process or the new thought process, and is that a good thing?
Absolutely. I think that before you come into first standard, and particularly for children who are coming from families where there may not be a lot of exposure to preschool education, having a couple of years to get ready and get ready in the right way, I think is absolutely fundamental. Private schools have had, lower KG, upper KG, kindergarten, all this kind of thing before. But I think what this policy hopefully will do is to say that you need age-appropriate, ways of getting children ready. That will then get you ready for first grade. So it's not what often happens is that you take the schooling that is above and kind of bring it down lower, but rather that you build from what children at age 3 or 4 need and take that higher. I think that is the intent of the policy, to say that if you build the early foundations well, in the US, they used to have a program, I think they still do, called Head Start. So if you do the start well, then you have a much greater possibility of leaping forward. And I think that much of what the document says is reflecting that kind of orientation.
Right. And is it also, I'm guessing that it's to do with the fact that 90% of brain growth happens before the age of 5.
Mm-hmm. And I think also a lot of your habits for learning are built very early. So, if your habit for learning is rote learning at age, lower KG, I mean, that in fact, goes against all the things that you're going to need when you grow up.
Right, and you feel that this structure addresses that somewhat?
I think that while we've had Anganwadis, private schools have had lower KG and upper KG. We've been seeing, as Pratham, we work with several state governments to bring a pre-primary class into the primary school system. Both Punjab and Himachal have implemented a pre-primary section in their schools. Punjab has done it in all their schools, Himachal in about a third of their schools. But there's been a real struggle as to where does the Anganwadi leave off, where does the pre-primary begin, who is responsible for that. So I think by bringing in the importance of this continuum from age 3, it will help to sort out some of these problems. Because as states were interested in doing this, there was not a clear guidance that this is the way to proceed and the convergence is absolutely necessary.
Right. So another point, and I'll go sequentially, is this, it's more architectural, the school complex, a cluster of schools around a higher secondary school. Tell us about the thinking behind this and what it can do.
I think that, again, our states vary a lot in the way that the linkages between the different levels of schools exist. If you look at, for example, I'm right now in Delhi. Delhi has a very different system from many parts of India, where in Delhi, the children go to the municipal schools till class 5, and then you shift into the Delhi government schools, which go from 6 to 12. So while there is one shift that you do at the end of primary into your upper primary, but once you're in 6th, you can go all the way. So I think there is something to be said for a continuity that takes you from, in the US, they call it K through 12, or at least from 1 to 12. Large part of the sort of elite private school systems are also built like that, where there is no discontinuity in your, growth path. But a bulk of government schools, there is a switch at some time, and sometimes there are 2 switches. So I think that, in trying to think about how do you minimize transitions are points where you lose children sometimes. The way our rural system is constructed is that there is a set of primary schools that feed into an upper primary, and then a set of upper primary that feed into a high school. So I think thinking about the geographical spread and the connections between the schools is important. I have to say that in the latest version of the document, I have to read exactly what they mean by school complexes. But to me, a policy document is kind of like an umbrella. It's providing broad guidance, and now it's up to states and other authorities to really effectively use the direction and the guidance that is given to do what makes good sense in that context.
Right. So, you focus a lot, and I'm going to come back to the medium of instruction question as well, because that's already causing, a lot of discussion or triggering a lot of discussion. So you run the annual State of Education report, and you look at outcomes, and all your studies, even until the one last year, continue to point out that outcomes are weak, learning levels are low, children are not, absorbing enough, and cognitive skills are low. And one of the things that this report seems to be doing is focusing on cognitive skills. So in the context of what the work that you've been doing specifically and the gaps that you've been highlighting, what does this report do? Directionally, at least.
Yeah, so I think that what the report absolutely does is to say that this basic, ASR measures really the basic ability to read fluently. We use the ceiling of the ASR reading test is actually a second standard level text, the kinds of stories that you see in second standard books. And we feel that that is at least a level by which kids should reach up by the first, even if you say by the end of 3rd. So, the policy actually says that, and we are happy to see that. But what it also, I think we need to address, as the ASR report points out, that there are a lot of kids who are in school, who are in higher grades, who haven't reached that level. So I'm hoping that this foundational, the national mission for foundational literacy and numeracy will definitely help to build the foundations, but will also give a lot of focus to the catch-up, because these are not hard things to do. We've done this on very large scale with state governments and independently, that anything between 30 to 50 days, a child who is in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th can easily pick up this reading ability and math ability if time is made during school hours and if the effort is given. So in addition to having a strong beginning, I'm really hoping that the policy will push states to say, let's do the catch up, because that way the kids who are already beyond grade 3 will have a fighting chance to actually benefit from whatever schooling is going to offer. So I think that these two pieces need to go together.
Right. And just to step back once again. So when you look at this policy, who is it primarily targeting? Is it targeting government schools, private schools, children who are disadvantaged or less advantaged?
So clearly, I think that there is often people have a sense that these learning deficits are in, sort of rural and remote schools. That's not the case. ASAR is a nationally representative. Yes, it's a rural survey, but it covers 600 districts of India. And for 15 years, a nationally representative sample of children, which come from government schools, private schools, aided school, all kinds of schools, you're saying that 50% of children are reaching 5th standard without this ability to, read basic text. That 50% can't be just some margin. 50% is half of the children that we are talking about. And states that have actually done within their school system, even for their government schools, find that it's actually pretty close to what the reality is. So I think this is private schools, especially private schools which are in lower income areas, are also suffer from the same sets of issues. So I think this is a policy for India. And right. the elite schools have educated parents, have a lot of resources, but the bulk of India, I think, absolutely needs this.
Right. The other one is to do with language and medium of instruction. Home language as medium of instruction up to class 5, while encouraging multiple languages. How do you interpret that?
I think that the wording, and I'm trying to find the exact place where it is said. I think the wording is very important. If I remember correctly, what they're saying is home language, mother tongue, regional language. So in the last round, when there was a lot of debate over this language, it suddenly became like a English versus Hindi versus regional language. I think what government should interpret this as is, for the younger age groups, the closer the school language is to the language that the child is familiar with. I think that is what will be build a strong basis for moving ahead. The languages, I'm from Bihar myself, and nobody speaks Hindi at home. You speak Bhojpuri, you speak Maithili, you speak all sorts of things. And when a child first comes to school, you're faced with at least in your textbooks, you're faced with a Hindi that you may not understand. And so I think that fact that you have children who are coming from a home language, which may be the local language, which is a little bit different from the medium of instruction in school, I think this is our opportunity in India to take this whole business of language and learning really seriously and not get diverted into whether this is about English or whatever else. And I think that there is mention in the document about bilingual. And I'm hoping that bilingual doesn't mean English versus Hindi. It means Bhojpuri versus Hindi or Maithili versus Hindi, to help to, and the old-fashioned teachers in our schools, if you go back to the teachers that common people call Master Ji or whatever, they are from that local area, and so therefore that transition in some ways was natural. But now when you have teachers who are coming in through more sort of professional recruitment policies and being placed in places across the state, the difference between the teacher language and the child language, I think we should couch this debate as the teacher needs to speak the language of the child so that the child can learn the language of the teacher over a period of time. And this may vary from context. And the language formula, the 3-language formula, should allow real contextual connections to be made in this context. And now, of course, you'll ask, how is this to be done? Lots and lots of work will need to be done. But if that's the intent, bring the home close to the school, bring the school close to the home, then I think for small children, you can achieve quite a lot.
Right. And no, I'm thinking, for instance, in Delhi where you are or Mumbai where I am, we all come from different places and speak different languages. So at home versus maybe what is spoken outside in the state or the city and then in the school. So is there a logistical problem you see, or is that something that we can manage?
See, for example, Bombay forever, I mean, for as long as I can remember, has the Bombay municipal schools run in 8 languages. So while they don't run in 20 languages of India, they do run in 8 languages. And the biggest number of schools are in Marathi, Hindi, Urdu, and then some Gujarati. And then, of course, there are other language schools. Now, in these schools, they're often, I mean, as you probably know, in the crowded areas in Bombay, different floors in that same building have different language schools. But the children are playing together in the playground in the same way. So I almost feel like we should teach in the language of the playground, because the playground is where real communication is happening. So I think Bombay has shown that these things can be done. You have to figure out how to do them, because, I mean, in Delhi, for example, you may not need 8 languages because maybe a bulk of the population that is in Delhi speaks certain things. And I think this is also an opportunity for private schools who may have more resources, both in terms of parental resources of parents who know many languages, to really think about how you can, you can provide in the languages that make sense in your context.
Right. Very broadly and very quickly, you obviously have already said that this is a good report. What's your sense on when a good part of it could be potentially implemented, or when would you like to see things implemented? Is it going to be something that's, somewhere in this academic year, next academic year? How are you seeing the timelines?
So let me say a couple of very practical things. One is there are a large number of schools in India already. On the early childhood side, there are a large number of schools, it varies from state to state, but a large number of schools where there is already an Anganwadi in the school compound. So which means that there is a physical presence already. And there you need to ensure that whatever is the developmentally appropriate activities happen in the Anganwadi, and those children move into school. So I frankly think that, I don't think that is such a big step. It's 2 departments coming together. I've seen in many schools in Punjab where the actual convergence on the ground is quite smooth, but on top the buildings may be different. So I think that is one that could be, relatively quickly, if the 2 departments work out what would be the logistics, because the kids are physically already in the same space, the teachers are physically already there. How do you up the capability of teachers? That may take a little longer, but I don't think that should stop you from doing, things in this continuum. On the catch-up side, with kids who are in standard 3, 4, 5, 6, who are still lacking foundational skills, I think my own wish is that the minute schools open in this very strange year, we should do a very quick Asad-like assessment, which takes 5 minutes to figure out where the child is at. And if we find that the child is not able to read or do basic arithmetic, do a quick campaign. And these campaigns can be done by the schools themselves to help them to reach this. So I would really like the catch-up to happen right now. I mean, as soon as we can when the schools open, and start thinking about, how will we bring our early childhood continuum together. It may be a little bit more difficult where there is physically kids are not together, but where they are, I think very practical things can be done to start quickly. There are lots of other things which will take time. How this bilingual stuff will happen, what will the textbooks be like, the school complex one, I have to really understand what that means. But I think the foundational learning and the early childhood continuum and the catch-up, make it a national priority, move behind it, don't get stuck by what I feel is the over-ambitious curriculum, which often has been a big obstacle in getting some of these simple things done.
Wonderful. Rukmini Banerji, thank you so much for speaking with us. And I do, of course, hope to come back to you as we dive deeper into this policy and it starts getting rolled out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.